Thank you for joining us for Inspecting Our Foundation. This monthly series based on the report looks at moments in public works history that have disproportionately impacted and at times harmed the city's communities of color. Today's conversation about the iHotel is the first of two parts. The welcome music you heard is iHotel by Caroline Kabading, musician and executive director of the Manilatown Heritage Foundation, and she'll be joining us next month for the screening of the newly restored documentary, Fall of the iHotel. This will be on August 17th. You won't want to miss it. I cry every time I see the documentary. The iHotel has been mentioned in multiple of our lunchtime conversations, so I'm glad we have two lunchtime sessions dedicated to it. Today's goal is to bring to life the role that the iHotel and its defense played in San Francisco, and also prompt all of us from Public Works to consider our role inside city government when we hear compelling advocacy from the community. So to help meet these two goals, we have an amazing panel of folks who have done so much for San Francisco, the Asian American and specifically Filipino community, and for low-income people everywhere. We have longtime community activists, scholar Estella Habal, Emil Guzman, and journalist Dyan Ruiz. To kick this off, Estella, could you please share your connection to the iHotel?
Yes, I was in my 20s and I was part of an organization, Filipino organization called the KDP, Union of Democratic Filipinos. And we felt that the destruction of Manilatown and the defense of the iHotel and stopping the eviction of the elderly tenants was important to do work with. Emil, who's one of the speakers here today, he was already an activist there, and he also was in the KDP, and he asked a couple of people, myself and Jeanette Lazam, to join the team to work with mainly the iHotel tenants and to bolster, them. As you know, they were elderly, so it was, difficult organizing anyway when you're even young. And so we supported them in not just social service, but also political speeches, driving them to demonstrations, bringing them to the mayor's office, lots of different kinds of activist activities. And they were actually the leaders, and we were the organizers and supporters of the tenants.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some of those activities in a moment. Emil, what was your connection to the iHotel?
Well, I go back, to 1968 and 69. I was a young student at Berkeley, and I actually go back even further. My parents, as a small boy, would take me through Manilatown and Chinatown. And so I was very familiar with Kearny Street and Manilatown. My dad had friends, and they would frequent the businesses there, like the restaurants. So I go back way back, even before I got involved, which was in 1968 and 69. And I was after the Third World Strike at Berkeley. We had heard that there was a fire and 3 elderly were killed, and it was found that it was arson. But the whole north wing of the building, the roof, that whole floor, because of the water from the fires, it drenched the second floor, the commercial spaces on the basement and the first floor. Well, that precipitated some of us who were pretty militant to get out there into the community and fight to defend the tenants because they were faced with an eviction immediately after that. So it was a defense of the building, defense of the tenants against eviction. And that's really just how I got started. And I basically, I was, from there, I was a volunteer all throughout. And at some point, being in the KDP, we had a team that went in there and really did the kind of organizing. When at that point the judge issued the order to evict, so that's really when things really began to intensify.
Thank you. And then Dyan, how did the story of the iHotel and the movement to defend the tenants and the building resonate with you as a young activist?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in San Francisco. So when I moved here about 10 years ago, I learned about the legacy of the iHotel and not just the struggle to fight against the eviction, but also the story of the Manongs and the struggles that they faced immigrating to the US, the racism that they experienced, and the fact that many of them were living in iHotel, why they were living there in the first place, instead of being able to start their own families, was because of racist policies that didn't allow them to be married. It was because of racist policies that didn't allow them to own property. So I think there's, learning about that legacy was so important, and, really important to learning about the history of Filipino Americans. So so honored to be part of this panel with Emil and Estella.
Thank you all. So we're going to start actually with a clip from Sa Amin, which is a video about Filipinos in Soma that Dyan and People Power Media produced. So can you help set up the clip that we're about to see? Dyan, do you want to introduce it or?
Sure. So Sa Amin tells the story of the history of Filipinos in the South of Market neighborhood of San Francisco. And so this story is really an expansion of the Filipino American story. I think a lot of folks know about the legacy of the iHotel, but they don't know that much of South of Market legacy as a cultural hub and a landing place for Filipino Americans. That's sort of the larger story that we're telling in the documentary. But in this clip, we are focusing on the iHotel and the legacy of the iHotel, which was located in a different neighborhood in Manila Town, at the time when Manila Town was thriving and existed, which was adjacent to Chinatown, close to the financial district. And so this was sort of the kind of interplay of those two neighborhoods with each other, and the legacy of that organizing to the South of Market neighborhood.
My grandfather liked to talk story, which is a term for just like, shooting the breeze, right? I remember a barbershop on the ground floor of the iHotel. As I was getting my hair cut, a lot of the older Manongs would be just talking story in their dialect. I later came to understand that some of them were retired from working in the fields of Delano and Central Valley, and then also some of them were survivors like my grandfather, having served in the Philippine Scouts during World War II. Many of them would reside in South of Market and make their way over to Manila Town. There is that connection between the South of Market and Manila town. And in 1977, I did participate in, was one of the 3,000 people who made that protective ring around the I Hotel to prevent the Manongs from being evicted.
Came down to the physical removal of tenants from that space. But what people don't realize is that because of that fight and the organizing that started in the International Hotel, that really was instrumental in the creation of our protections. As a result of the sacrifices of our Manongs who put their bodies on the line to save the International Hotel, we have rent control. We had a housing movement, more protections for tenants.
It's so much uncertainties that actually go through, because you don't know if you're going to be able to live here or not. Going through those 4 attempts, 4 eviction attempts, each one of them, when it begins, it's always the same. You don't know what to do. We're of the low income bracket, and if we were to find another place, we wouldn't be able to actually, rent it out. That was the first time ever that I've learned about tenants' rights. It was empowering. I felt like, okay, we're not alone, in this whole place.
When you put a community like the Filipino community that has its focus on family and relationship, and knowing that many of these individuals and families will be separated forever, created a large disappointment that they may not be able to create a community that they could call their own. The Chinese at the time had Chinatown. The Italians at the time, they had North Beach. So there was a lot of frustration, and which resulted in a uptick in political involvement on the part of the community. They were on survival mode. They needed to say something to the city that told the city that, hey, we're not as invisible as you think we are. We've been here for several decades. While we can't stop redevelopment, we need to somehow give the community the recognition that we were part of this neighborhood.
The progressive forces involved and organized in the International Hotel created the momentum for the city to award the Filipino organization with affordable housing, which came out from the Tour lawsuit against the redevelopment. It also created the momentum to change the name of certain street into Filipino national heroes. Now people starting to survey what the needs of the immigrant, what's the needs of the resident, and what's the need of the society in before it's not a diverse community. Now it's getting more diverse.
Thank you so much for that. So that Amin clip was a teaser about some of the gains made from the iHotel struggle, as well as ongoing housing issues. And I love that interplay between Soma and Manila Town. So first, let's talk about the defense of the iHotel. We know that the owners wanted to evict the tenants and plan to demolish the building to build a parking lot, a plan that would require a permit approved by Public Works. So Emil or Estella, which communities got involved after the eviction notices were posted? And then what were the different ways that communities got involved?
Well, there was church community. There was some like early housing movement activists. There were labor people, community people in Chinatown, organizations and groups in Chinatown. So it was kind of like, this is kind of unknown, but Asian American movement probably. It kind of, I would say it's one of the first Asian American movements. Wouldn't you say that, Emil? Don't you think?
Yeah, I without a doubt, the third world strike was really, it was really at that time we coined the name Asian Americans, and it was really that thrust from that really got involved in the early struggles. But I want to kind of comment on the video a little bit, just to step back, because Manilatown was a 10-block community. What you see in the film is just kind of a 1 block, but it really was a 10-block where there were tenement buildings, there were businesses. These were where over 10,000 Filipinos would live. And after World War II, that's when the expansion of the financial district basically took over much of the Manilatown district. And it really, when it got down to the, to 1968 and 69, that's when I Hotel was the last building standing of the whole 10 blocks. That was the whole fight to maintain Manilatown, but fight for the I Hotel. And that's kind of what we did. So, but I did want to, in addition to what you were saying, it really was you have to understand that the backdrop of the I Hotel was because of the housing struggles that happened in Yerba Buena. That so much destruction, thousands of units of working class, disabled, elderly in the South of Market was destroyed, and in order to make way for the Yerba Buena Convention Center. And that's what I think it was sort of the backdrop, precipitated the awareness that so much of the city was losing housing, that it wasn't building any affordable housing. And then they went into the International Hotel.
I would go back even further. The destruction of the Fillmore District and Western Addition of the Black community there was devastating for the people there. And even the activists in that area called it Negro removal. Okay. And so this whole move of development meant that they were going to turn certain parts of the city, to develop it into a financial center, and the city center, expand the city center for finance and other high-tech, later businesses. So it goes that far. And
right. And we did have a program on the redevelopment in the Fillmore, and Chuck Collins and somebody from Kane came on. So it's great to connect those dots. I wanted to get into your strategies for the defense, because we might have been our department may have been one of the targets. So you talked about people involved with ethnic studies, students, you talked about labor, you talked about the faith community getting involved, but what exactly did that look like? I know there were fundraisers. I know there was renovations after the fire, and Public Works approved the permit for the demolition. So what were the strategies maybe externally in terms of organizing the community, and then maybe internally to try to reach people with positions of power within city government?
Well, I was going to add that, in response to that question, you have to understand that the first eviction that happened in '69 created a groundswell. That is, that it was an intergenerational relations between the Manongs and the young people. That is, it was really the young people's energy, picketing, demonstrations. It was really, you might say, the leverage that I think really brought a coalition of labor and churches, the faith community, the civil rights community together, and the United Farm Workers, in order to be able to really stop the eviction. So it stopped the demolition for one. And then from there, it was the whole emphasis after July 1st, when the United Filipino Association took over. That is, it represented the tenants, that they really had to take an old rundown building and transform it into a community, because the way that the owners they had basically planned to keep it neglected, and so our Manongs were really living in very terrible conditions. And our job was, besides fixing the fire damage area, was to bring the whole building up to code, but more importantly was to be able to build the relationships between people, because we knew that down the road we were going to be faced with eviction again. And so therefore it was important that we try to build our community, that we try to work with our supporters and help in building the coalition. And what happened 3 years after the 1969, when we only got a 3-year lease from the owners, was that we were able to stop the owners from trying to evict again. They thought that they could get away with, time will tell, and the tenants will be weak enough that they can go after us again. Well, it was just the opposite. We were stronger. And that forced Walter Shorenstein and the Milton Mine Incorporated, that forced them, their hand, to ultimately put the hotel on market, because they knew that it was far more trouble than it was worth, that they put it on the market for another owner to buy.
Mm. And
Okay.
then,
Oh,
go ahead.
I wanted to speak to what you're talking about. You're asking a question about the strategy with city government and people who work in government. So first, what is important is what Emil was saying about how the community, support was critical in making it known, so that government officials and other government people know about the struggle and that there's support for it. So that's the kind of the first step. And then there was also kind of a progressive movement when district elections, when it was first proposed, the progressive movement was starting to build. And some of those politicians who were elected, like Moscone and Harvey Milk and those folks, and there's other people in the supervisors, and then other people from, say, the Human Rights Commission, understood and learned about what the iHotel was about. So some of those people, right in the beginning, Moscone wrote a letter and said, he's going to support the iHotel. Okay.
Mm.
And and then there were other people, I forget her name now. Well, anyway, David Prowler, who was in the Human Rights Commission, and then there was, I forgot her name, but she, they they supported the iHotel, and I think they even did some kind of, I think I read it on your website that they did some kind of survey about housing and things like that. And so they used that as the basis to apply pressure to those other government officials. So, you know, we had relations with those kinds of people. You know, but, you know, sometimes they can be an ally and then sometimes they're not. You know, that's part of the problem. And in terms of politicians, it depends on what force is greater, you know, that can put them in office, or from another end, who can, you know, take away their power. So, you know, it's something like that. And so, like, I guess with people in the demolition crew and DPW, they probably, I would suspect, it was pressured by other private property forces to finally demolish the hotel, you know, because usually private property reigns over uh, people's homes and people's, you know, living.
Well, I think that we might say, so we did not do the demolition. We might say all we did was approve the permit. And I think what we're here to discuss is something as simple or innocuous seeming as approving a permit can devastate people's lives. And so as people here on this Zoom who might be the person approving the permit, this is an opportunity. And maybe Dyan, if you want to talk about the different ways that you work in terms of issues that arise today, what role do you see like city worker line staff? What are kind of advice that you might have or wishes that you might have for line staff to do or to know?
Yeah, I mean, so in my role, so I wear many hats. I'm co-founder of People Power Media, a nonprofit media organization whose mission is to build power for housing justice and equity in land use. And we do that through a few different ways. One of them is popular education, and part of that is the documentary Sa Amin. And Sa Amin means our place in Tagalog. And it's really, you know, the main struggle of the film, of the documentary, and of the community is really about place. It's about displacement and placemaking. I think there's a lot of, you know, there's such a rich history of Filipinos in South the Market as a cultural hub and as a landing place for Filipinos, but the community really struggles with visibility and invisibility. And I think the documentary will really help in creating the narrative that is beyond the tech companies, it's beyond tourist attractions, it's beyond you know, just getting to the highway. It's really talking about the community that's there in the alleyways. And that's sort of what I think on a kind of immediate level, maybe thinking about going to the communities that you are making decisions about and talking to the folks that are affected by those decisions. You know, it's not just a matter of filing the paperwork or, you know, looking at it on a map. You know, these are real people and these are real communities. And they have a rich history. And if it wasn't for the stories that we tell about these communities, really the advocacy and kind of having that seat at the table wouldn't be there. And I think, so I really, really appreciate all of the work of our, the folks that come before us, such as Emil and Estella and all the folks that fought in the iHotel and also tell the story of the legacy of the iHotel. So this is really changing the narrative and really kind of looking and reflecting at the past and the present. is really something that the film does as well, as you talked about, Robin. We relate the current gentrification pressures to the policies of the past, which includes redevelopment. And at the time, it wasn't just happening in Soma, but I think the story about redevelopment in Soma has been kind of not necessarily been in the story of San Francisco. And I think knowing that story is important, and also learning from past mistakes and not repeating redevelopment. And, another one of my hats is through People Power Media, is facilitating the Race and Equity and All Planning Coalition, REP SF. And we can't talk about policies that are up for a vote coming up. I've been told that.
Thank you.
I won't talk about past ones, but I'll talk about, I won't talk about upcoming ones, but I'll talk about past ones, which include the housing element and the budget, which just passed. So looking at the housing element, which is the policy that determines housing in San Francisco for the next 8 years, the various policies. And, how is that being implemented? Are demolitions part of it? How are we going to accommodate for all of this additional market rate housing, if not for demolition? So that is something that is, in the housing element that passed. And, as folks, a staff of the city, the devil is in the details, and the devil is also in the implementation and enforcement. And so how are laws that are kind of being decided right now and have been decided through this housing element going to affect the most vulnerable people when it comes to the implementation and enforcement? How can we further protect folks that are vulnerable and also uplift them in the decision making? So that's sort of, that's a lot to think about, but also kind of, knowing I think this process that we're going through right now, and through this discussion and through the report, is really important to reflect and to recognize everything that's happening, that has happened, and it is happening with DPW. Of course, there's a lot of struggles, especially with the sweeps of our unhoused neighbors and things like that. But we don't want to repeat redevelopment, and that's something that we are very strongly aware of, dangers that might happen if some of the policies that are highlighted in the housing element are put forward, instead of policies that really look at housing justice and uplifting and protecting vulnerable populations.
Well, thank you for all of that current and historical information. And, you had already alluded to some of the despite the eviction, some of the wins that came out of the movement to defend the tenants of the I Hotel. So Estella, Emil, or Dyan, do you want to talk about some of those wins regarding tenants' rights or rent control?
Yeah, I'd like to, after the I Hotel eviction, it really created created a lot of unprecedented moves by the city, because it was such disgrace for the city, for the law enforcement, of the city and the mayor's office, to evict elderly on the street, to throw them out on the street. We had U.S. senators, the Frank Church, Senator Church sent his representative out. The whole eviction had sort of hit this whole nation. I was on the front page of many of the national newspapers because they had a photo of me being dragged out, being surrounded by the sheriffs. But what it did is it created such a disgrace for the city that they had to do something. So what they did is they moved toward a lot of the other tenement buildings, and they began to move to. It pointed out the how neglectful the city was around affordable housing, that they took on many of these tenant buildings. They began to upgrade them, and that was one way of being able to make more available housing, but they had to be upgraded for the elderly and for the disabled. So that was a big jump, in the city. But I just wanted to, and this added toward, Stella pointed out the lawsuits against redevelopment. Well, many more new housing buildings, tenement buildings were built in the south of the market for the elderly. So this was a good thing. In fact, it created the idea of nonprofit developers, like Chinatown Community Development Corporation, or TOTCO. They were in the business of getting money from the city in order to be able to purchase the land and then also build buildings. So this was a big step. Now, I wanted to kind of go back to one point that was made by Dyan. We have incredible problems today, okay, and so much of San Francisco is not affordable. I mean, people have had to move out because working class people cannot buy the homes, and even the rents are high. So you have to take that into account in terms of the fact that the city still is not building affordable housing. So much of the fight with planning department has always been luxury housing that goes up. Well, that takes valuable land away from the working class communities in which people lived in. So this is still the ongoing fight. Homelessness is the big problem in San Francisco, and out of that is also the mental health issues, the drug issues. So we still have big problems in what the city faces. The city's economy is not really geared toward working with the people, the poor of our city, as well as for working class families. It's moved in the opposite direction. And I think that's where the focus really should be for the city. And I criticize the planning department for allowing all this. So I look at the public works department and I say, you have to be able to integrate yourself into the communities to embrace and appreciate the character of our communities in the Mission, in the Bayview, into the Western Addition, in order to be able to really keep what we have as a treasure, so that it doesn't get evaporate. It doesn't go away, and especially to keep families and children in our city.
Thank you. I want to open it up for questions, which you can do in the chat, or you could come on screen. And as we wait for those to roll in, and I really do want to encourage attendees to participate and engage in conversation with this panel, I'd love to put that image back up, Clinton, of Estella. And this is from a poster series done by local artist Kim Artechi, and these were in the bus kiosks throughout the city. And it was focused on the women leaders in the iHotel struggle. So can we get that image back up?
Mm.
And then Estella, if you could just kind of reflect on the quote and the image. Oh. I wonder if I can share. Oh, okay.
Okay, I was one of two people that were chosen for this Muni bus kiosk showing. And I think what Kimberly or Tesh was trying to put out here is that there were also women activists in the struggle. Most of what you see of the images in the film of Fall of the iHotel and other images is the elderly men, and that's good. That's okay, because that was the demographic. However, there were women activists also in the iHotel. And so that's what I was involved in. And I think that's what she wanted to point out, that, you know, I was one of the defenders of the iHotel and against the eviction of the tenants.
But I also loved your quote, like less so about what Kim's intentions were, but what you were trying to convey with the quote that she ended up using.
Yeah, well, it's about the fact that women were also activists, and that that I was part of that, and I wanted to be part of this housing movement. And I believe it's a human right. Housing is a human right, and that's something that is not universally seen, you know, as a right. And and you know, it was something that's still, even today, something that people should struggle for.
Thank you. And I'm looking to see if there's any questions in the chat from my colleagues. We'll leave some space for that. I mean, we're very lucky to have you here and to have your insight. Can we hear about so the building, the tenants were evicted, the building was demolished, and then it remained an empty pit for many decades. I think Estella and Emil, you were both involved with the new iHotel. So can you talk about what that struggle was and what we do have in that site currently?
Yeah, let me step. After the eviction in 1980, I think it was 1980, 81. The Mayor Feinstein organized a Citizens Advisory Committee for the International Hotel. So it was a combination of Filipino community, Chinatown community, and I believe even the Catholic Church was involved. And it was really their role to try to keep watchdog the owner, to try to see what they were going to build. So the insistence was that there would have to be on that land, where the iHotel was after the demolition, and it was a hole in the ground, to be able to maintain that there would be housing built on it. That was the condition. This is what was the demands of the community. And from 1980 up until 1993, 94, you know, the owner had tried, that is the 4 Cs, and the owner was really a liquor tycoon from Thailand. You know, he was a absentee landlord. This was foreign capital that was the one that did the job of the eviction. And so every time they tried to present a blueprints for a new building, they would try to build, you know, a building with parking and also office building. It would be a high rise, but their whole issue around housing was very, very scant. And so therefore it was rejected every time. And to the point where the owner began to unload it, you know, it just became an albatross. And so it was really the work of this Mayor Citizens Advisory Committee that really prevented any new structures. I mean, this was a battle, you know, to keep it from being anything being built on it. So finally, the Mayor Feinstein, who was a U.S. Senator, along with Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, were able to take advantage of presenting this to the Clinton administration, who then gave a $7.6 million grant to be able to build a new building on there, to be able to purchase the land and to be able to build a new building. from 1994 all the way till 2005, about 11 years it took to build a 15-story high-rise of affordable federally subsidized housing for elderly over 62 years old. So the tenants of the International Hotel were not the beneficiaries after the eviction. It's only the elderly who later applied, who were able to get in, and that's who lives in there now. Predominantly elderly over the age of 62, and this has been this has been going from 2005. So we're talking about 18 years that this has been going on. So that is a big victory. This is a big victory.
That's huge. Thank you so much. I did see the question, and we will be plugging a commemorative, the August 4th annual commemorative event at the end of this session. But I did want to turn to Dyan to see if she could help make that connection between the establishment of the Soma Filipinas Cultural District with this conversation.
Sure. Yeah, so you actually saw part of that connection in the documentary clip that you saw earlier today. There was this part where there was protest footage that was slowed down very, very slowly, almost frame by frame. And that was taken from Redevelopment, a Marxist Analysis. And it was actually important footage because it showed that Filipinos, Asian Americans were part of that struggle against redevelopment. And it wasn't just predominantly white members of the tenants and owners in opposition to redevelopment. And TOR was very important, of course, in the lawsuit against the city regarding the fact that there was no relocation to the people who were displaced out of Yerba Buena by the city, and that's why they won the lawsuit. And when they won the lawsuit, because as I said in the clip, as MC says, because of the momentum and because of the power that was built in the community from opposition of the I Hotel, there was a similar, those communities were right beside each other. Everything was happening all at the same time. Redevelopment, the third world strikes at the SF state, all of this was happening all at the same time, right? And because of that momentum, it created the momentum to award a Filipino organization with the affordable housing. And that was built in an area that is now identified with Filipino national heroes. And that was the map that you saw. And that was the affordable housing that you saw, the San Lorenzo Ruiz buildings. And so that was sort of like one of the first, I would say, city acknowledgements of Filipinos in South of Market and kind of renaming those streets and kind of building that affordable housing. But it took a long time for that recognition of Soma Filipinas, and arguably it's still kind of happening. And I think the film hopefully will continue that kind of claiming of space, claiming of the place of Soma as for Filipinos. So that it's like, it was amazing to uncover that footage. As I said, it was from a different documentary that we were able to use. And also part of this, I just want to say that some of the things that you saw, those clips from Saamin, the footage of folks in the International Hotel, folks in the community in South of Market, those are very precious images, and they're not readily kind of seen by people, to see themselves in the history of San Francisco, seeing people that look like them, but were dressed in those amazing outfits back then. I think it's so important for us to kind of see ourselves being reflected in the story of San Francisco, and that's what Saamin hopefully does. And I know that continuing to tell the story of I Hotel definitely does that. And it's all about us claiming space as a community in the larger narrative of San Francisco, and creating that power to sustain the communities that we've built. And that includes supporting some of the things that we talked about, is such as Bessie Carmichael School, which continues to struggle. You know, there's continued to be gentrification. There's a lot of struggle and recognition. So the story of Soma Pilipinas was similar to that story I just said, though, so just to kind of wrap it up, but there was a struggle against the 5M development a few years ago, and that was a luxury development that was planned near the Mint Mall and the Chronicle building at 5th and Mission. And although the community failed to stop that development from happening, which was in the Soma Youth and Family Special Use District that the community established, because of that struggle, it created the momentum actually to create Soma Pilipinas. And because Soma Pilipinas was on the back burner for 10 years. And so, you know, we learn from the struggle, we also grow from the struggle, and we create, you know, long-term gains from all of these struggles. And so it's really an honor to be able to share some of those struggles with everyone.
Well, thank you. We did want to remind folks, Beth has put it in the chat, that we will be screening the 40th anniversary newly restored documentary, Fall of the iHotel, a 1-hour film that serves as witness to the community's fight to survive. And it's a tribute to the dignity and strength of the elderly tenants in the hotel. And we'll be joined by the executive director of Manilatown Heritage Foundation, who's also a musician and wrote the song that we heard at the beginning of the hour. And Manilatown Heritage Foundation has a August 4th eviction commemoration event, and that will be from 1 to 6, an exhibition of their archives, followed by music, food, and poetry to honor the tenants who called the iHotel home. I want to finish signing off by just some last words from Emil, Estella, and Dyan. Emil, go ahead.
Oh, one of the last things that I was not mentioned is that besides the group that got behind the International Hotel to build it, that is that the Archdiocese, the city and county of San Francisco's Mayor's Housing, CC, Chinatown Community Development Corporation, was the Manilatown Heritage Foundation, which is a group that we formed in order to advocate for a center inside the new International Hotel on the ground floor. And it exists. It's the Manilatown Heritage Foundation, and it really is to enshrine the legacy of the International Hotel. If you go there, you will see many photos, and you will see that we try to present to people who were the International Hotel tenants, who were, so that they are really never forgot. So that's the important thing, that when you come by, you should go into the International Hotel at 868 Kearny Street.
Dyan, and why don't we finish with Estella with an uplifting final comment. So Dyan.
Because I'm not going to be uplifting. Well, I do have some homework for everyone, actually. So I think that, you know, one of the things that I want folks to think about is, you know, the actually putting the show on the road. You know, maybe I think the report is like a beautiful start to really the truth and reconciliation that we all have to, you know, go through together as a city, I think, not just the staff, but, you know, the communities affected by redevelopment, by current gentrification. You know, I think be great to have that space, and I don't know who's facilitating it, but I think that you know, some of the acknowledgements in the report even are very healing. And I think it's, I think this is a big step forward. And I think we can have more of things like this where we kind of make that open space for people to heal. So I really appreciate everything that that folks are attempting to do through this report, and I really appreciate the continued work and kind of learning from our past mistakes and acknowledging things currently.
Thank you. And Estella?
Okay, I have to unmute myself. My dog was barking, so okay. Well, I think the young people are taking the baton and running with it, and I think they're learning about what happened in the past, and they're also coming forward, as part of representation of minority communities here. So I, even as been activist since 50 some years now, I was part of the building of the new Hotel, and I was in my 40s and I'm in my 70s now. And so it's a kind of a lifelong activism, and at the same time, I think that I'm tired because I'm old, but I'm not tired of hearing about the young people who are, making all of these things known. And I want to say thank you, to Robynn and the others there at DPW who's making this story known, because it reverberates all throughout, the city. And I think we need to learn about our city. We need to learn about those struggles of especially the minority communities that have been affected by redevelopment. And, we love our city. I mean, that's basically what it is. And so if you love the city, you're going to learn about it. You're going to learn about all these different struggles, and it just makes you whole.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of our panelists, Emil de Guzman, Estella Habal, and Dyan Ruiz. I want to give a shout out and a thanks and acknowledgement to Chris Fujimoto, whose images we were sharing. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we have some homework to do. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming and just teaching us. Really appreciate it.